since the recovery of 2008. Has anything improved? Is the economy back to normal, or is this whole thing one gigantic illusion?
Yeah, I'd go with the illusion. Nothing's really changed. A lot of people before Trump got in said that he was going to be like drain the swamp and all these sort of things. And all he did drain it to some extent, and then he completely refilled it with Goldman Sachs people and all the same cast of characters, just with different titles. And many people say, oh, he's going to lower taxes. Well, we really haven't seen much of that yet. And even still, the U.S. government is going into more debt than it's ever gone into. So even if you lower taxes, but you're still going into more debt, that's just another way of taxing people. Inflation is the only way to pay for it is through central bank money printing, through the Federal Reserve criminal mafia. And if they're just going to print more money, then it's just changing how people are getting robbed. So there's really hasn't been any change that I've noticed. And I said this from the start. And actually I said before he got selected, which I believe he was selected, not elected, that there wouldn't be any major change whatsoever. This is the left-right game that people still fall for. And so what happens is they'll put in someone like George Bush and he'll do something like 9/11 and most people won't notice that he did, and they'll still cheer from at football games and stuff. A lot of brainwashed people out there. And then the left side will go, oh, we can't handle this. This guy is he's not left. We need left. And when we have a left person in there, it'll be good. And then they get Barack Drone Bomber, who was given the Nobel Peace Prize before he was even president, and then went on to have not one day of peace his entire presidency, continued on all the wars and created many of his own under his regime, and nothing really changed. And they went to more and more debt. And then the people on the right were like, we can't take this. This left is not good. We need someone right in there. And of course, Donald Trump, who was a Democrat most of his life anyway, but no one seemed to notice. Best friends with Hillary Clinton most of his life. No one seems to care. And he gets in, and then the right side's, okay, everything's good now because now we have someone right in there. It's like, don't you guys realize this is all just a big game? You're still slaves. You're going to be enslaved. You have been enslaved, and you will be enslaved as long as you continue to believe in this system. And so to answer the question, no, he hasn't really changed much. There was a bit of a market rally based on his rhetoric after he was selected. But I think most of the market, anyone who was buying for that reason, like, oh, he's going to rejuvenate the U.S. and all this sort of stuff, it's actually not even possible now with the amount of debt and the amount of money printing, and still interest rates near 0% for going on 10 years now. We're just waiting for the final collapse of this system. So there really hasn't been much change whatsoever. And I did not expect any change. And those who did expect change, I think they've been basically fooled. Of course, he's always this is the left-right thing. They will always do something kind of like that looks pretty good, right? Like, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that Donald Trump's done that looked pretty good. I guess one of the things is he calls CNN fake news. That's pretty good. That's true. And he's done a few other things like that. So some people go, oh, this guy, he's on our side. No, they always have to do a couple good things to make people like have some sort of faith or trust in the system. But then they continue on with the debt enslavement, the destruction of the economy through the communist central banking system. They continue on with the wars and killing and extortion. And even Donald Trump has really increased the police state in the U.S. And the U.S. is one of the biggest police states in the world. I think there's maybe a few countries I know of that are possibly worse police states. And that's basically North Korea, Cuba, and Venezuela, and then it's basically the U.S. in my opinion. I've been kidnapped there more than anywhere else in the world, that's for sure. And he's increasing that, and of course he's a big fan of asset forfeiture. Which just means cops can steal without any sort of repercussions. He's a big fan of that. So no, I don't see any change, and we're just waiting for the final collapse, and I think it might actually come this year.
So you think that is it the central bankers you think that are going to bring the system down?
I think they have these plans well in advance. Everything that we've seen and looked into, for example, the euro currency was discussed at Bilderberg, I believe in the 1960s or 70s. So they have got these long-term 20, 30, 40-year plans. I find it really interesting that the front cover of The Economist magazine, which is owned by the Rothschilds, where they put these very occult, obscure cartoons on the front, which sort of give some ideas of what they might be up to, in 1988 said, get ready for a new world currency. currency, and it said 2018 on it, and it was a phoenix standing in a pile of burning dollars and yen. And we know all the fiat currencies are very soon going to collapse. We've had 0% interest rates now for 10 years. That's absolutely insane. You've seen the U.S. government double its debt load and already had too much and way too much. It was not sustainable before Barack Obama. Now they've doubled it since then. And Donald Trump comes in. Everyone's like, oh, he's small government Donald Trump. Well, he's had the biggest deficits in history. And we've seen the biggest money printing still continuing. This is all going to lead to a complete and total collapse, likely on purpose, to bring in sort of a one world government, one world currency sort of system. This is what they've talked about for decades. George Bush Sr. said right on the floor of Congress that in front of the two fascies that are always behind the president there, saying that we're entering into a new world order, and this is their new world order. They want to see top-down control of everyone and everyone on Earth completely and totally enslaved. And of course, I sort of stand for the opposite. I say, why don't we all become individual sovereign human beings and take control and power into our own life, and we will have a peaceful and prosperous world like we've never known it. So those are the sort of the two ways it could go. And because of cryptocurrencies, it's starting to get quite interesting that we could actually see it going more towards what I would like to see, which is complete and total sovereignty and the end of enslavement for humanity.
I want to get into cryptocurrencies in just a minute, but I just want to back up for a second. Where do you think they want to bring us with this one world currency? I mean, where is it still going to be here in the United States? Is it still going to be the dollar, or do they have plans to move it someplace else and have another country handle the one, world currency?
It really looks like what they talk about the SDR. They've been talking about the SDR, the special drawing rights, for decades. And it really looks like that's what they're going to try to move to. And the interesting part is they're looking now like they're going to go make it actually a cryptocurrency to an extent. It will be a digital one world currency after everything collapses. It definitely won't be the dollar that survives this. The dollar it's clear that they've decided to destroy the dollar decades ago and actually destroy the U.S. decades ago for whatever reasons that they want to do that. But that was clear. It looks like they're trying to move a lot of the power to Asia, China, and places like that. But as how it all rolls out it's going to be very interesting because we now have the free market creating its own cryptocurrencies, which are not backed by any central bank. There is no office for things like Bitcoin. There is no CEO that they can arrest. There's no way to shut it down without turning off the internet or turning off all the power in the entire world, which they actually talk about. That's why they talk about the internet kill switch all the time, because they're considering if things get bad enough and they start losing enough power, they will try to do some really insane things. So we'll see what happens. This is not like a written in stone sort of thing, in my opinion. And they are losing a lot of control in many different ways right now. So we're really heading into what I consider to be sort of like the final battle, so to speak, even though I don't think of it as a battle or a war anymore. I don't like to think in those terms, but really I see them as being, it's funny because I just had our biggest conference here called in Acapulco. We just sold out with over 1,500 people. It's really growing. And the whole conference is about freedom and individual sovereignty. And it's really catching on. Ron Paul was speaking here and many other people. And I said at that conference, I said, they consider us to be the resistance, but I consider them to be the resistance because they're resisting humanity reaching its full potential by having all these systems of slavery and control and power and extortion and violence all over the entire world. So we aren't the resistance. They are the resistance. And I think they're starting to find out that this is not going to be so easy just to do this.
Now, the central banks like the BIS, the IMF, even the Federal Reserve with Mnuchin, they're all out there and they're demonizing cryptocurrencies. They're saying, oh, criminals use it, terrorists use it. And, when I hear this tells me that they are trying to steer people away from it. Because they want people to associate it with this being used by these type of individuals. Is there is that what you're seeing? And is there a reason why they're doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. The reason is because they can't actually stop it. Like I said, if there was a Bitcoin office or a Bitcoin CEO, the Bitcoin office would have been raided with a SWAT team years ago, and the CEO would be in Guantanamo Bay right now, because the biggest threat to this entire power structure is their control of the money system. This is how they've controlled so many things for so long. It's gone on centuries now, starting with the Rothschilds. And if they lose control of that, they lose control of everything. That is the root of their power. So they are very scared. It took them a while. It's sort of interesting because when the internet first came out, I was wondering why they didn't try to shut it down right away. And I think they're not that smart. They're kind of slow too, but they are very, very evil and violent. And once they do realize what an issue is, they will go after it with anything they can. So how are they going to shut down things like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies? Like I said, you can turn off the power of the internet, but that's about it. So they're trying to demonize it in any way possible. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of things going on with them saying, oh, if you use Bitcoin, you're a money launderer. Well, money laundering is a good thing. I hope everyone out there is a money launderer. That just means you're avoiding the extortion of the evil state. So they flip everything. They like to say that, a lot of the good things are really bad and a lot of the bad things are really good. And they actually convince a lot of people through their control of all the mainstream media into buying into a lot of these things. So that's what they try to do right now with cryptocurrencies. They're trying to demonize it as much as possible and say, oh, it's used by criminals. Well, who's the biggest criminal organization in the world today? That's the U.S. government. It extorts people for trillions of dollars every year. It goes around the world blowing people up at random and at will, just for fun for the most part, if you actually look into it. And they say, well, terrorists use it. Well, who's the biggest terrorist? The people that did 9/11, people like George Bush, Dick Cheney, Wolfowitz, go down the list, and there's many other people involved as well. But, they are the biggest criminals and terrorists. So what they try to do is make people believe that the people who are just using money that can't be controlled by them are somehow criminals and terrorists. And hopefully it doesn't work, but they do still have a lot of brainwashing through things like television programming. It's called programming for a reason. It is literally brainwashing, and they control the message, and they can, to some extent, make people believe that a lot of things that aren't true. And we'll see what happens. It's going to be very interesting how well they can keep this under wraps or keep this evolution from happening. And it's not going to be easy, but we'll see what happens. I expect many more big attacks on cryptocurrencies in the coming years as they've really started to figure out this is a major problem. You see them talking about it at G7, G20, Davos. They're all going crazy. Like, how do we stop it? And we'll see what happens. They're going to be doing a lot of really bad things, in my opinion, in the coming years as they really realize how close they are to losing their power.
Now, there are certain banks that decided that you will not be able to use credit cards to purchase some cryptocurrencies. And actually, I've heard from people where they're saying from like Coinbase and other exchanges, they're having trouble basically cashing in and exchanging their Bitcoin or any other, Ethereum for dollars. Is this a way of them trying to stop everyone from doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. But like I said, they're not that fast, they're not that smart in these terms. So it's taken them a while. So you kind of see it happening just all over, sort of scattershot. They're even trying different things in different countries. So they'll try in like Russia to outlaw Bitcoin just to see what happens. Then they'll be like, okay, everyone's still using it. So that's not working as well. And then they'll try in other areas. Okay, let's get the banks, which we control, to not allow people to transfer money in or out of cryptocurrency exchanges. And they've talked about numerous other things, creating all kinds of laws. And they've arrested already many people under money laundering for using Bitcoin. Of course, the most famous one is Ross Ulbricht of the Silk Road. And many others, and they'll continue to do things like that. But hopefully, people start to wake up and start to realize what's really going on, and move away from this system. The system's already bankrupt; it's already over. That's why I started the Dollar Vigilante in 2010, and I said, by the end of this decade, all fiat currencies will have collapsed, and I think we're still very well on track for that. By the end of this decade, in the next couple of years, all the currencies will collapse because you can't stay at 0% and print up tons of money forever. At some point, it goes into hyperinflation. And then what will people use? Well, if they still have access to the internet, they're going to look at things like Bitcoin and go, maybe I should just use this. This is a lot better. And when the government comes around and tries to, use violence against them and extort them, hopefully people wake up and rise up a little bit and just do not listen to their edicts. That's really how they have control of so many people. The word government is just govern, to control, meant. I'm here in Mexico. That means mind. Some people say that's not for sure the root of the word, but it sounds about right to me. That's really what it is. It's mind control and just getting people to believe and actually demand their own slavery.
So if we move into cryptocurrencies, let's say, how easy or how hard would it be to transition from a fiat currency system into cryptocurrency? Is it that difficult?
Well, the thing is that you don't you don't have this power structure that enforces that. You just let the market do what it's going to do. And so if, for example, before the Greece events happened and they shut down the banks for months, I was telling people in Greece, I was like, get into Bitcoin now before it's too late. And what happened? They waited until all the banks were closed, and then they all started lining up outside the bank trying to get their money out. It's like, no, you're doing it wrong. You're supposed to do it before they close the banks. And that's going to happen everywhere. We saw Cyprus where they did their bank bail-in, and they just overnight just took half of a lot of people's money in Cyprus and just said, oh, yeah, we need it, so we're taking it. So it's really up to people to wake up to things. The fiat system's in collapse. It's been in collapse for decades, and it's getting really near the end now. So people should just start realizing that and start using things like cryptocurrencies, start using things like gold and silver. Don't keep your money in banks. They're all bankrupt. The FDIC's bankrupt. The U.S. government's bankrupt. Everything's bankrupt. This is all going to end very badly for a lot of people if they don't wake up. But I think the transition can be fairly easy and it's a lot better if people wake up before, unlike those people in Greece, than when they wake up after, because there's going to be a lot of panic and chaos when everything just shuts down one day. Whereas if a lot of people had already thought that maybe this is going to happen and already started to prepare, like I said in Greece, if a lot of those people had a little Bitcoin and maybe even a little gold and silver, when the banks closed, they'd be like, that's okay. We'll just continue on. It's not a big deal. And then the IMF can't come in and start demanding of the Greek politicians who represent the people of Greece, although they totally don't, and actually extort them for even more money. And people wouldn't stand for it at that point. So it's going to be very interesting. There's just no way to know how it's going to happen. There's no way to know how people are going to react across the world. But that's a big part of why I started the Dollar Vigilante in 2010, is to try to get this information out there so that there's enough people that are kind of aware this is going to happen, that they can help transition into hopefully a new world without central banks and without large governments, and we'll have peace and prosperity like we've never known it. Or people will demand, in the collapse, they'll panic and they'll demand an even stronger government and a stronger central bank. And that's exactly what they want. This is always problem, reaction, solution. They create the problem, people react, and they react with what they want them to do, which is to demand, well, it must have collapsed because the government wasn't strong enough, or maybe the central bank wasn't good enough. We have to do a bigger one and a better one now. If it goes that way, we'll have tyranny on earth like we've actually never known in human history. So those are the stakes in the next couple of years.
Now, how far will the central banks go to keep their system? Because we can see what they're doing right now, and they're also blaming the volatility. Look how volatile Bitcoin is. I mean, how far will they go to keep this from happening?
Well, that's the question. They've done things like world wars just for fun, just to keep their control or to even get more control. World War I, for example, it's no coincidence that happened after the Federal Reserve was founded in 1913, one of the worst days in history of the U.S., when both the Federal Reserve was founded and also the income tax. And that's no coincidence. And it's no coincidence that World War I started a year after that. And it's no coincidence that then they brought in passports and they said, well, now we have to track everyone because, well, look what happened. World War I, that went on to World War II, which they also planned and caused. It was all on purpose and did the same thing. It shocked people. It scared people into fear. And that's what they want. They want people in constant fear. They'll continue to do these things. Even 9/11, that was a daylight robbery, a criminal event that was actually on television programming for everyone to see. And a lot of people didn't even realize what happened. It's just unbelievable. But they did that to start the war of terror because they're starting to realize we can't continue on with these old wars the way they used to have them because too many people have the internet and they'll get on there and they'll start talking to someone in Russia and they'll be like, do you hate me? And the guy in Russia will be like, no, well, why would I hate you? And the guy in Russia say, do you hate me? It's like, no, I don't even know you. And so they've lost control of communication to that extent. And that's why the internet was the first big thing that caused them a lot of problems. And now we have cryptocurrencies, which takes away the power of money away from them if people start using it enough. So we'll see what happens. They have no problem killing hundreds of millions of people. You could see nuclear bomb, false flag attacks for the next big terrorist event to bring in an even bigger police state and make people demand it as well because they'll be so much in fear. Hopefully at some point people wake up and realize what's going on and realize their true enemy is their own government and the central bank and stop cheering for them at football games and watching them on CNBC like they're someone to be revered instead of a massive criminal. But we'll see. They will do whatever it takes. It's just a matter of seeing what they will do. But they've shown in the past that they have no problem. If it takes killing hundreds of millions of people, they'll do it. If it takes destroying almost everything. They'll do it. But we'll see what happens, because enough people are waking up now. So we're starting to see that happen as well. And I know you've been talking about like the shooting in Florida and all that. I didn't even look into that. I stopped looking into them a while ago because almost all of them were obviously false flag attacks or even hoaxes or things of that nature. It was not what they said on television. And you're starting to see a lot of people wake up to that now. So if that continues, you might see a lot of change happen and a lot of people not going along with the system any longer. And if that happens, we'll see what happens. And they're very fearful of that. They're based on fear. They're incredibly fearful, and they know that this could happen, and that's why they try so hard to retain their power, because they know if people wake up, it's not going to be very good for them. So we'll see what happens, but I don't put anything past them whatsoever in terms of retaining their power.
Now, when people look at the crypto market, and there were two economists from the New York Fed who said, and I think even Jamie Dimon, they wrote like a crypto Bible or something, where they said, cryptos, they're not backed by anything. They're very volatile, like we said before. You can't really use it for anything today. And, they keep coming out with all these different things. What is their real worry? I mean, do we need banks anymore? Can they still tax us if we go to cryptocurrency? I mean, what is their worry here?
The real worry is the control of money. It was Rothschild who said in the 17 or 1800s, I care not who makes the laws, I care who controls the money, and I control the money. So they went on to create central banks across the world. They started using governments like the U.S. government and Israel and many of them as their sort of military to go in. So whenever you look at which country's being attacked next, it's usually one that doesn't have a central bank. They want to install these central banks across the world. Once they do that, and they pretty much have it already, there's only a few countries left. And of course, in the last few years, some of the countries that didn't have a central bank controlled by the Rothschilds was Iraq, Syria, Libya. It's pretty obvious what they're doing if you're awake and if you don't watch your television programming too much. So yeah, we'll see what they're going to do, but that is really all they care about. And most people don't understand how central banking, how nefarious it is, and what an evil scam it is on humanity. It is constantly robbing from every single person every single day. It's a hidden tax. Henry Ford, the creator of the automobile, said in the early 20th century, if people understood how the monetary and banking system works, there'd be a revolution tomorrow. And I think it was John Maynard Keynes who said, not one man in a million understands inflation. And that's all on purpose. And you don't get taught in your government indoctrination camps, which you're forced into for 12 years to do your Pledge of Allegiance. You don't get taught about what money is, how it works, how central banking works. That's all on purpose because they don't want people to know. But now we have the internet and some people are starting to realize what's going on. So that's really the root. This is why cryptocurrencies are so important. This is why we are very close to a massive shift here if we can see actual private cryptocurrencies not controllable by anyone, not able to be shut down by anyone. If those start being used by the majority of people, they lose their power. They control everything through the central banks. So when they want a government to do something, and they control almost everyone, because they're very nefarious. They've got, there's the Jesuits, there's the Zionists, there's the Masons. The U.S. was all founded by Masons. They got all these secret societies, and they put all their people in all the powerful positions. But then on top of that, they will come in and say, well, if you don't, bomb this country, we'll, cut down your money supply, which will destroy the economy, which will make it so you don't get elected next time and blah, blah, blah. And that's how they control everything. And then a lot of people just go in it for the greed. That's why people like Donald Trump, Barack Obama, George Bush, they're all in it for more greed. They want more, and they know they will get more money, which I don't even know why they even want all this money. I don't know what they do with it. This is like only so many cars and houses you can buy, but it's really power that they want. And if this central banking system goes away, then all their power pretty much goes away. 90% of it at least goes away. So they pretty much lose most of their power. And, The Lord of the Rings was written by J.R.R. Tolkien, who said he was an anarchist. And the entire book is an allegory. The ring of power, that's the ring of governments and central banks. And hardly anyone can handle that power. So even those who think that Donald Trump was a good guy and now he's come in and now he's gotten corrupted, it is possible, I suppose, that he was a good guy. He met with, I could go into why I don't think he is. But even if he was, most people can't handle that power for whatever reason. That's why even Frodo, the nicest, purest, hardest little hobbit from the Shire, couldn't do it on his own. He needed so much help, and just to get rid of that ring of power is really the hardest thing to do. But thanks to cryptocurrencies, we have a shot now. So we'll see what happens.
So do we need banks like JP Morgan Chase and the rest if we move and transition into cryptocurrencies?
No, absolutely not. That's the beauty of it. And even Barack Obama said about 2 years ago that cryptocurrencies is like having a Swiss bank account in your pocket. And he even said during that speech that how are we going to enforce taxation if everyone has a Swiss bank account in their pocket? And he's right. And that's exactly the case. And so they really realize this is a major issue for them. So if people take the power, and we've never had this power as humanity before. This is beautiful. And it's so interesting that Bitcoin was launched right at the height of the financial crisis in 2009, which was nearing the very end of this system. And it actually came out with a very explicit message that it was going to be there to replace this system. And it's so interesting to see how much it's developed in just the last 9 years. And we'll see if people begin using a lot of these things a lot more. If they do, like I said, it will be an amazing time in human history. People, for the first time in our history, we have the power of money and banking all in our own hands. In fact, if you have $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, you can store it all in your own brain. That is incredibly powerful when you have these massive mafias and extortion rackets called governments and IRS and people like this and central banks all across the world who want to steal most of whatever you have. So this gives the power back to the people. It's a beautiful thing. It's the opposite of what they say it is. They say it's used by criminals and it's used to buy drugs. Well, the biggest drug runners in the world is the Bush crime family and their poppy fields that are guarded by their troops over in Afghanistan. And this is what sociopaths do. They're very sociopathic. They project everything that they are onto good people. So they say, oh, if you use Bitcoin, you're a criminal, you're a terrorist, you're a money launderer. Well, that's all the things that they are. They are all those things, and they actually use it for bad reasons. So hopefully people start to wake up to that, and we'll see what happens. I've been really surprised how much cryptocurrencies have taken off in the last few years, and so there is hope. People are starting to wake up, and we'll see what the powers that be or shouldn't be do, and we'll see if people are strong enough to stand up to it eventually. And the beautiful thing about this entire thing is not one shot needs to be fired. There needs to be no riots. There needs to be no protests. You just take the power of money and banking into your own hands and the privacy of your own home or on your smartphone, and that's it. It's over. That's the beauty of it.
Now, you said cryptocurrencies were created during the financial crisis. Who do you think really created it, and why do you think it was created?
Well, if you look back far enough, you can see that this was part of the cypherpunk movement, which is a bunch of crypto anarchists that were working on stuff like this, cryptology and many things in the 80s and 90s. You can see Satoshi was somehow involved with them. Many people ask, why hasn't Satoshi come out and said who he is? Well, he'd be in Guantanamo Bay immediately. Even the people who come out, they found the one guy had the same last name in California, swarmed cops everywhere. There was an Australian guy who said that he was Satoshi, immediately SWAT teams in his house, and they were looking for him. So if Satoshi ever came out, he'd be, in Guantanamo Bay. So that's a good question. If you look into his writing, I actually
do you think
wrote
he's
the
a real
foreword
person,
for the book
or do you
of
think it's a
Satoshi,
group
which
of
does a
people?
really good job of going through all of his writing and putting it in a nice format so that you can kind of see what he was trying to do. If you look at that, it does look like it was one person because you couldn't sort of see three different ways of talking or different styles in the talking. But I would not have any doubts whatsoever if that person also was working with other people, because what they came up with at that time was truly genius. And the fact that they knew so far ahead of time that this would change the world and designed it in such a way that it's still here 9 years later. There's no one who runs it, no one who controls it, and it's still here without any massive problems. Bitcoin has had a few problems in the last few years. There's people trying to manipulate it and trying to take it over in various ways right now, but they can't to an extent. So Really, I don't know who it is. I have no clue. I've had a few people that I know that I'm like, you could be Satoshi, but I don't know. And the beautiful part of it is it doesn't matter. It's open source software. It's just an idea. And so it really doesn't matter who actually put the code together the first time. What matters is we now have this power and we can free ourselves if we choose to.
Jeff, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can everyone see your work?
If you like the financial stuff, just check out dollarvigilante.com or just on YouTube, Dollar Vigilante. If you like the more freedom stuff, I host a podcast called Anarchast. And if you want to come to a freedom and quite cryptocurrency conference, we have one every year in Acapulco called Anarchapulco. And you can check all those out on the web or just Google it.
Jeff, once again, thank you very much for being on the Spotlight. I really appreciate it.